All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you are hearing this, you have once again tuned into the Consequence of Habit podcast. This week, I'm going to sit down with a fellow Athletic Brewing Ambassador. And I'm going to get into this guest story. But first, I want to say that I reached out to Athletic Brewing when I started this nonprofit. They were the first company I reached out to. They've been with me my entire journey, whether it be getting sober, whether it be starting the podcast and now the nonprofit, and they have never let me down. So I want to give a huge thanks to those guys. They are supporting our first event that we've got coming up. We've got a plogging event coming up. And if you don't know what plogging is, well, it is jogging while you're picking up trash. So we're doing a little something for yourself and then doing a little service work, doing something bigger than yourself. So a huge shout out to Athletic Brewing Company. Man, you guys have been awesome. All right, getting to this week's guest. This week, I sit down with First Lieutenant, Ranger qualified, Paratrooper, Dan Ellis, a.k.a. Ultra Runner Dan, if you check him out on Instagram. This guy has one of the most powerful stories I've ever heard. You know, last month it was suicide awareness, and I was trying to get this one out last month, and life kind of got in the way. And to be honest with you, it's really bothered me. But you know, I apologize to Dan, and he was really gracious about it. Even though last month was Suicide Awareness Month, this is obviously a cause that should be brought up every month of the year. And I'm here to tell you, once you hear Dan's story, I can honestly say I've never heard somebody kind of go through the amount of trauma that he has, continue to be an inspiration for others, continue to be positive. I call him a unicorn. At one point in the interview, I call him a unicorn, and I mean it. So thanks so much for Dan for coming on. I look forward to some big things from him. With that said, please welcome to the podcast, Dan Ellis. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us here at the Consequence of Habit podcast. Today, I am joined by Mr. Dan Ellis. Dan, I appreciate you coming on, man.
JT, I appreciate you having me, man. It's always good to talk to new friends and, get the word out there.
Fellow Athletic Brewing Ambassador.
Wearing it right now, actually. I wish I had a can in front of me, but drank them all up over the last couple of weeks, man.
I know.
Big races, you gotta put them down after a big race for recovery. So
that's the only thing, man. They seem to go by. They go by quick. So I don't have one right in front of me either at the moment, but great group of people, man. Just a solid group of people doing some pretty amazing things. And that's actually how, I believe that's how you and I got connected. I'm not even 100% sure. I think maybe you reached out. I reached out to you. I saw your Instagram page, which is, what is it? Ultra Runner or?
Ultra Runner Dan.
That's it. Ultra Runner Dan.
Yeah.
And then I saw not only are you a veteran, you are a active duty service member.
Yes, I am actually. Yep.
And
we met Athletic Brewing Company on the Ambassador Facebook page. I posted on about upcoming race I got going on, and yeah.
So anytime I see that, I mean, I love just that whole group. But then I see, you don't see a lot of veterans on there. You see a couple every now and then. So when I saw that, that always sparks my interest. Dan, you are doing some absolutely insane running, my friend. Even right before I got on with you, I was scrolling through your Instagram, kind of looking for little nuggets of things to talk about. And I'm seeing like sub 6 minute miles for 5-6 miles at a time. Dude, this is
not as fast as I used to be, man. I tell you what, it feels good getting the miles in, and it sounds kind of funny to say, but you switch to doing ultra marathons is like the lazy man's way out of doing 10Ks and 5Ks. Because you don't want to keep doing the fast miles and doing all these sprint workouts, putting stress on your body. But yeah, I started out my running career in high school. We had to do it as conditioning for our wrestling team, and I just kind of fell in love with it. I did wrestling for so long, and you're at a crossroads where you burn out with one hobby, you're starting up another one, and it's like the most exciting thing in the world. Started running through high school, and then that brought me to running in college, and once you turn that page from college, it's very few athletes are, blessed, conditioned, disciplined enough to take that to the next level. So I just kind of recreationally took it to endurance running, and then, it's just kind of taken off from there. It's a sport I'm super passionate about. And, I consider it a blessing every day to be able to throw the watch on, throw the shoes on, and get out there. So
yeah, that's the way to look at it, right? I mean, there's a couple different ways to look at it. You can run and you go, man, this sucks. I'm suffering. This sucks. Or you can think of it, hey, man, this is an opportunity. There's a lot of people that wish they could be doing this right now, and I'm fortunate enough to be that person. So
yeah, both those thoughts definitely go through my head at times.
Oh, I'm sure. So where are you right now?
Yeah, so right now I am currently stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, home of the Airborne. Working in the 82nd right now. Currently in transition to a new job that I just recently did a tryout for. I won't go into too much detail with that, but I got a bunch of training coming up over the next year and a half. And anytime you come out of working specifically for the unit you're assigned, it kind of opens up this door of opportunity to get in shape, focus on family, focus on schooling, stuff like that. So I'm really excited, man. It's you finish one job and that in between gigs portion right there is, it's a little nugget of a blessing that you get to spend with family and stuff. So
yeah, sure. Especially with the tempo of what the military's been over the past 20 years now. It's just been intense for the amount of time that people are deployed and getting ready for deployment. So I imagine that time has got to be a real blessing for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So let's get in. Well, first let's talk about, before we kind of get into your backstory, let's talk about the event that you have coming up. What is the big thing that you're training for? And I'm not talking military. I'm talking on the civilian side. What is the big military thing big race that you got coming up?
Yeah, so actually a couple weeks out, October 10th, me and one of my coworkers, Steve Kent, will be competing in the Spartan World Championships out in Telluride, Colorado. Usually they do this event overseas. I think the last couple of years they've done it in Sweden, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like this culminating event where any person who has competed in a Spartan event, specifically at the ultra distance, which is typically a 50K, so 31 miles, they take all the times and all the placements over the course of the year, and they basically send out an invitation to select people who have run a certain time or placed at a certain position in their age group or the elite group. And they get invited out to the World Championships, and they step the event up a little bit. They bring the distance from 31 miles to actually running a 24-hour race.
Wow.
So what that looks like is basically, they have a 10-mile loop, 25 obstacles, and you just start going at it, hammering away for 24 hours, and whoever does the most loops is they are crowned the Spartan champion. So
that's awesome.
I'm looking forward to it. It's an event that I didn't expect to be doing this year. Steve and I did our first Spartan actually back, I think it was in May or June. We did the first one, and then that one just kind of like kicked the door wide open. We placed a little bit better than we thought we were going to do because we were coming out of doing a field exercise that week, and we were like, we'll just see how the obstacles go and just kind of have some fun with it. But once the gun goes off and everybody starts running, it's just like a switch that clicks, and you're hungry and you want to keep pushing it. So it's an event that I didn't expect to be doing, but I kind of used it as an opportunity moving into September to bring some awareness to something that's very personally near and dear to my heart. And I think it's a topic of discussion that's kind of a taboo for a lot of people because it's kind of uncomfortable to talk about.
Sure.
Especially because there's two sides to the conversation. One where you don't want to offend someone, and the other where it may be emotional for some people to talk about. Mm-hmm. But I think those conversations need to be had. So that's why I chose to, through the obstacle training for the Spartan World Championships, kind of make it not about myself, because that's not really what it is. Anytime you go out, you're doing a run, working out. The first thing you notice is the times you're running and how you look in the mirror when you're working out. But it's really something bigger than yourself. It's spreading awareness. And so I decided to dedicate the race to suicide prevention and awareness, specifically through an organization called SAVE. SAVE over the last several years, especially coming from a military background, they've put in a lot of research into suicide with regards to PTSD, research into suicide prevention and awareness over the last 20 years. And, we can certainly add a link to their website, I'm sure, to the podcast for people to click in. They have this really powerful timeline on their website that kind of goes through since 1995 when they started the organization and all of the progress and just leaps and bounds of research and community that they've been able to build over the last almost nearly 30 years through their organization. So, I chose to reach out to them, got their permission to, set up a GoFundMe that donates directly to them. And the goal is to raise $100 for every loop that I complete of the Spartan Ultra, which, hopefully that's upwards of like 8, 9, 10 loops. Doing 100 miles would be a significant achievement for that obstacle course. But, at the end of the day, even, $10 that I'm able to raise is $10 that may go towards, getting somebody else the help that they need.
Sure. And we'll get into the reasons that organization or just really, I would say the cause itself is so personal to you.
Absolutely.
But have you found even throughout training that having this thing that is bigger than yourself has kind of maybe brought you to a different level, or at least mentally brought you to the ability to kind of push through things that traditionally you wouldn't have?
Absolutely. Anytime you're doing something, I personally believe that accountability measures in our life are absolutely critical. And I know that sounds just kind of like, a couple buzzwords that are thrown around, like what is accountability? And really, to me, it comes in many different forms. It comes in the form of a training partner. If you're waking up in the morning and you're meeting somebody to go do a run, you don't want to let that person down. But it also comes in the form of goals that you're setting for yourself and people you're trying to reach out to through your training. I found like the most effective training tool that I have is putting a race on the calendar, or putting a race on the calendar, or just putting out the awareness of like running or doing something for a specific cause. So whether it's even something as small as, I want to help somebody in my neighborhood get better at running, so they're going to meet up with me and go for a jog, or
right.
I'm going to raise money for suicide prevention and awareness. That instantly just sparks something in your mind where, it's not for me. So I'm not hitting the snooze button for my personal rest. I'm hitting the snooze button on this cause. And that makes it a little bit more difficult to hit that snooze button.
Yeah, it's got to be. And let's get into, I hate to just dive right into it, man, but let's get into why this thing is so important to you and how it's touched your life profoundly. Let's give a little background of kind of where you grew up and maybe your situation family wise.
Yeah, of course. And I feel like I could talk for all day about my family life. I have 6 siblings, so that alone, even just naming them off would take like 30 minutes. But yeah, so I grew up. I was born in a really small town in Ohio called Cambridge. There's, to put perspective on it, there are fewer people in that town than there are in the high school I went to in Atlanta, Georgia. So,
wow.
Really small town. My dad had me, my brother, and my sister by the time he was 20. So you can imagine 20 years old, you just got your hands full right from the get-go, cards kind of stacked against you a little bit. But, he was able to push through that. We moved around a lot growing up. And through the process of, starting out where the cards are stacked against you, it caused a lot of people to turn towards, different outlets on how they handle and cope with those systems. And while there's never necessarily a wrong answer to the way people approach those things, there certainly are things that have effects secondary, tertiary, all on down. So for my dad specifically, it turned to alcohol, which is something that, I'm super passionate against. And that's why I'm a big fan of Athletic Brewing Company, because love the taste of beer. But, through my life, I've just seen a lot of instances where people take something that is, it's awesome. Our country was founded on hops and brews. And, unfortunately, it's a long path that people go down where, one thing leads to another. And now you're a different version of yourself that, you would not necessarily be proud of seeing, if you were able to look into the future and see what it would turn you into. And that's kind of what happened with my dad, because, he started out young, full of hope, full of drive, left a small town, and, started drinking alcohol, abusing alcohol over the years. And, we ended up settling down in Atlanta, Georgia. He built a really good life for himself. He was managing Goodyear stores in Atlanta, had, 7 beautiful children that were doing, big, amazing things. My brother joined the Marine Corps. My older sister is raising 5 kids of her own, which is just an absolute monumental feat of its own. But, over the years, it turns into a point where somebody makes so many decisions, and you try to figure out as you mature as a young man or a young woman, how do I talk to this person and let them know that the habits that they've developed over the years aren't exactly who they truly want to be. Yeah. Because you look at someone and you see the version of themselves that they currently are, and you see and hear them talk about the version of themselves that they want to be. And then you're trying to decipher and navigate this obstacle of, do I be totally honest, or do I try to build this harmony and kind of like let that bad habit continue? And, that was a struggle that my brother and sister and I were facing for a while. And,
hey, Dan, at what age are you having those thoughts?
For me, it started as early as, freshman year of high school. When you grow up in an environment that is a little bit more toxic than most people would be used to, I went to school, and on the outside, I was this normal kid, did wrestling practice, went to school, made decent grades. And people kind of like see this it was like the middle school social media. Like they see a version of you at school, but it's totally different than the version of like what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so today you see like Instagram, Facebook, people act a certain way online, and it doesn't always reveal the truth about what they may be going through or the thoughts they're having and stuff like that. So for me, I had to grow up really quick, with our home life, alcohol abuse, just really toxic environment. And by the time I was a freshman in high school, I kind of realized my brother was moving out. My sister had already moved out. And it was like this maturity to where you realize, okay, I need to identify how I'm going to get through my life as I grow older, developing better habits than the person before me.
Yeah.
There's this idea that people are defined by the people that raise them. And I think that that's true to an extent, but I think it also limits some people who have achieved pretty incredible things despite their circumstances. I can think of a number of people who have come from a rough upbringing and have been able to transform that into taking that mold and turning into an idea of, I'm not going to be exactly like the person that I was watching every day.
Hey, and this is just off the cuff. What do you think that is? Like, what is it about a person that can see that at an early age and decide to make a change? Because to be honest with you, I think they're the minority. Most people fall into a habit. They see adults doing something, and I've said it on here before, where you go, hey, well, like I thought this is what adulting was. This is I thought what you did. Was there another father figure or just other families you saw them and you go, hey, well, my circumstances aren't the norm, and I don't have to go along with this?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely is the minority to take a negative example and grow positively from that.
Right.
I think what it really turns into is the ability to look ahead. So when you feel like you're in a hole and you're cornered, to be completely like full disclosure, there was a lot of stuff that took place in the Ellis family household that a lot of people may not have known about. A lot of alcohol abuse, name calling. You could go down a whole rabbit hole, right, which I'll save the listeners from. But once you're backed into a corner, you kind of start looking for the window or the door. Like, how am I going to escape this situation? And for some people, unfortunately, it turns to drug abuse. It turns to lashing out in the form of, negative attention at school. I'm going to get bad grades so the teacher talks to me, whatever. And I know this because these are all things that I considered when I was at that age. You're at a crossroads where it's okay, can I continue acting like everything's okay, or can I lash out and find the attention that I'm not getting elsewhere as a young man, preteen, high school age? And I think what it really boils down to is you have to decide whether you want that temporary happiness and getting that instant gratification of the attention that you're looking for, or finding the long-term joy that you feel like you deserve, which everyone does. And so for me, I was fortunate in that my older sister had already left the house and she had started building a family of her own at a young age and has just excelled exceptionally with it. So, I saw her as a young mother. She had her first child when she was 19. My dad had his first when he was 18. So, I was looking at this and I saw, okay, my sister is incredibly happy, doing amazing things, raising her first child from a young age. My dad started the same process at a young age, but it was a wildly different result.
Yeah.
And so I started to dissect, like, okay, what is my sister doing? What habits is she developing that are pushing her down a different road than the road my dad went down? And so I think it really is just dissecting the difference between your temporary happiness and your long-term joy.
That's where it's all at. I mean, that theme comes up time and time again in this podcast, and whether it's talking about what you are, any type of personal happiness, these short-term things are overall just lead to long-term unhappiness, where these investments. I think the Wes Hurt, the guy who started Clean Cause, he had a shirt on that said return on life investment, and it was doing these things that are just these positive things that may not make you feel good right away, but will bring
Absolutely.
an overall sense of happiness and pride that you just won't find in these things that bring instant gratification. But I digress. I'm sorry, man. Go ahead. I'll stop interrupting now.
No, you're good, man. I love conversations. So I think that brings up a good point. It goes back to the adage of just being honest with yourself and being honest with those around you. And it's something that, like, once that honesty is addressed, it opens up a world of possibilities. And for me specifically, as the story continues for the Ellis family, the years kind of tick by. I went through high school and kind of started to identify, like, how am I going to push myself to avoiding turning into the person that I don't want to be. Specifically, my dad. Sure. As a young man, the first thing you look at is your dad. What is he doing? How is he happy? In what ways is he unhappy? And I either want to be like that person, or I want to try and find ways to avoid being like that person. And fortunately for a lot of people, the first is the option. I want to be just like my dad. And unfortunately for some people, the latter is the option that they have to try to tackle. And, in some cases, either one could be harder than the other. But for me, I think it really started my senior year of high school. I kind of navigated those 4 years trying to figure out who I was going to be as a young man, where my goals and priorities were. And it actually, was kind of like this metaphorical moment, if you will, where the night before my high school graduation, my dad and I had gone in an argument. He was drinking all night and, ran out of alcohol and, obviously needed more. So it was, hey, I need you to drive me to the store to get more because I can't drive myself. And I think I remember saying, no, that's enough. It's late, whatever. I had graduation the next morning, and it turned into an argument where essentially I got kicked out of the house that night, which, there are worse things that could have happened that night.
Right.
But I got kicked out of the house. I remember grabbing my cap and gown, no shoes on my feet. I was in running shorts that, I was just lounging around the house in, and I slept out in the woods in my hammock. The next morning rolled around, and, I kind of stood there and I was like, well, I got to get to graduation somehow. Right. And so I just started going for a jog. And at the time we had moved out to Jefferson, Georgia, which is, just northeast of the perimeter of Atlanta. My high school graduation was in Gwinnett County, which is, if you've ever been to Atlanta, you have the highway that wraps all the way around the city, mm-hmm. and Gwinnett is just right outside the city. So you don't get to say you're from Atlanta officially. People will always give you a hard time on that one. But, that morning I just started going for a jog, and I had my cap and gown under my arms, and it was about 30 miles and a whole day's worth of hiking, just jogging the back roads down just off of I-85. And I got to my buddy Bradley's house with my feet all black because I wasn't wearing shoes from the the road and everything. And
wait, you did this. You did 30 miles without shoes.
It was 30-mile walk / jog without shoes in May in Georgia. And I will never, ever, ever be able to thank my buddy Bradley Morris enough, because I jogged up to his house in my old neighborhood and I said, "Hey man, you got some water?" And he was like, "Yeah, we have graduation in an hour. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I need to borrow some clothes and we're going to go to graduation together." And that's what we did. I think for me, that was kind of a metaphorical moment where, most of my childhood, I spent a lot of it kind of running away from my problems. When you go home to an unhealthy home life, you find yourself trying to avoid conflict as much as you can outside of that home life, because there's no escape when you're at home. So if you go to school and you get a bad grade, or you're not performing the way you need to for your coach in the sport you're doing, whatever the case may be, you find yourself trying to avoid those problems and not actually addressing them head on. And so as I transitioned to going to college and graduating high school, that for me was kind of a big moment of, I'm not going to run away from my problems anymore. I'm just going to chase the things that I want to accomplish.
Right.
And so that 30-mile jog to my high school graduation, that's like the first thing that really happened in my life that I chased on my own and willed into existence. And I don't think my feet have forgiven me to this day for that one, but definitely roll them out on a lacrosse ball.
Dude, that's setting you up for this race. That's setting you up for what I assume you might be doing in the military. It all. It's almost like this vision quest. You could look at that as this giant separation. It's kind of what you had to go through from the circumstances you were in.
Yeah, I certainly don't recommend it for the average person. That was the first, I guess if you want to call it, the first ultra marathon that I've ever competed in. And fortunately, I was the only one doing that race. Nobody else was next to me. But yeah, I think as I moved into college, that was kind of the first time where I realized I'm going to take accountability for myself. And, at the time I'd applied for an ROTC scholarship for, the school I went to, App State, go Nears. I applied for the ROTC scholarship, but I don't think that I really fully understood the magnitude of the responsibility that I had signed myself up for. I did an interview with the lieutenant colonel who was in charge of the program there, and, kind of sat down, talked about things, what my goals were, why I wanted to join the military. And at that time, to be completely honest, it was kind of personal. It was, I need my college tuition paid for, and I need to get an education. And I had been passionate about the Army since I was a young child, but I didn't really know why. I remember seeing the visions of 9/11, back in kindergarten, if you can believe it. I was that young at the time. And it didn't really resonate with me the way it did the surge after 9/11. Those people who flooded into the recruiters' offices to go overseas and fight our nation's wars. For me, it was really seeing that generation of soldier come home and witness the PTSD and the missing limbs that they had suffered as a result of going overseas. And I kind of realized that people reacted to 9/11, and now we needed people to react to those coming home from that 9/11 generation and fill those seats.
I've never even heard that. That's something that hadn't crossed my mind. Maybe it's because of my age, but to be somebody who's willing to enlist, and then that being the reason, because I've always, it's always profound when you see, sometimes there's flights that come into like DC, and it could be full of either Wounded Warriors is promoting or something. And, I've had the opportunity to talk to Travis Mills before. I don't know if you know who he is. I invite anyone to look up Travis Mills and his story. And, there's this, it's like, oh my God, this guy's got no legs. He's got no legs, no arms. But to see that and then to think that needs, those people, they need other people to join it. And it's almost out of a respect to them. And that's, dude, that's fascinating, man. I guess it's because I'm an old guy, but I never even thought about how that would affect somebody else. In my mind, somebody thinking about going would see that and be like, oh, no, that is not a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
Yeah, it's kind of like its own, unintentional recruiting tool, if you will, to, find the true patriots who are serving their country for the right reasons. And when I started ROTC in college, it was, admittedly so for the wrong reasons. It was selfish. It was, for my own personal gain. But I realized quickly that it was a goal in the back of my mind for a reason. And it wasn't just this tool as a means to an end. And so once I started in the ROTC program and I realized the work and the passion and the patriotism that had gone into it, I realized, the reasons for joining the military for me personally, while the scholarship had its own reasons, I remember looking back and the conversations I had with my brother when he joined the Marine Corps right out of high school. It was the same exact conversation of, if the scholarship doesn't work out, I'm going to join anyways. I want to be a Marine like my older brother, whatever the case may be. And it's one of those things where your professional maturity kind of grows as you grow through the ranks. And as a young cadet, freshman year in college, the last thing that you were thinking about is, school, what PT I'm doing the next day. It's, hey, I'm in college, I'm free for the first time. And so, especially coming from, a toxic home life, my freshman year was really, I wouldn't say difficult, but I would say there was a lot of self-navigation. I'm paying for my own bills. My college schedule was not ideal. I had classes in the morning. I had cross country and track practice after classes. And then I had to, and then I went and delivered subs for Jimmy John's until 3 a.m. So, and then once I was done delivering subs at 3 a.m., it was back at it at 6 a.m. the next morning for, Army PT with the ROTC program. So, that kind of helped, push me in the right direction. And that kind of goes back to the accountability measure aspect of it, where if you don't have the functions and the personnel around you to hold you accountable, you're going to get lost. Those people are your compass during land navigation. They help guide you in the right direction, especially if you make sure that you have the right compass by your side. So, as I started the ROTC program, that kind of, was the biggest turning point I feel in my life, where I kind of racked and stacked my priorities, sat down with myself and said, okay, this is the man that I'm going to be moving forward. And these are what my goals are going to be, not just for myself, but for those around me. And that, I think, is the best thing that you can do for yourself is be honest with yourself. I identified that I was at a point where my priorities weren't where they needed to be. I was doing things for the wrong reasons. I was, skipping practices. I was going out and partying a little bit too much my freshman year. And it takes you back to the adage of honest conflict is more powerful than dishonest harmony. And that one is really applicable in just about any aspect of your life, with yourself and with those around you. Because a lot of times we talk about accountability measures as a way of how is someone else going to help me. Very rarely do we address accountability in the framework of how am I going to help those around me. It's not all selfish. It's not all how is someone else going to hold me accountable. It also is how am I going to help hold those around me accountable as well. And so
I want to jump in on something. Can you say that say that again? Honest conflict is better than.
Yeah, honest conflict is more powerful than dishonest harmony.
That in itself, it had to be the complete opposite of what you grew up with. You said there was a lot of conflict, and you spent a lot of your life avoiding conflict and maybe just doing whatever it took to get through the day to avoid conflict. I mean, this is the complete antithesis of that. So that had to be a real change in your own personality to be able to even to be emotionally aware enough to know what you're doing and being the complete opposite of what you grew up being as a kid. That had to be
absolutely. And that's kind of where the transition helped kind of feed that motivation. So as I transitioned, when you're a young child and you're in a toxic home life, it's very difficult to find your reprieve or your escape from that situation. Your parents are your lifeline for food, your lifeline for rides to school or practice, whatever it may be. So you find yourself in this trap of, I can't be totally honest with my parents or my siblings when there's something unhealthy that's taking place. Because if I am honest, I may not get the things that I need to be successful.
Yeah.
So you find yourself in this trap. And honestly, we find ourselves in that trap as adults even. But at the time it was, I can't tell my dad that he's drinking too much, or that he needs to not drink and drive, or he needs to spend more time with the family. Because if I do that, the outcome may affect my ability to go to practice, to do the things I need to do for school. And so when I started out as a college student, it was finally the first time where I was able to have those conversations with my dad, because I wasn't relying on him as a young man for money or rides places. It was once I was 18, and the same was true for my brother and sister. Like, it's on you. You got it.
Right.
So, and it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because it opened up that dialogue of being able to have those honest conversations with our parents and, kind of talk about like, hey, we still have 4 younger sisters in the house, and we would like for them to have these conversations and these relationships and interactions that we didn't have growing up. And unfortunately, for our dad, it had gotten to the point where it was a trend for so long that it was hard to see any light at the end of the tunnel. So we would have these conversations. My brother and I would drive our dad to rehab multiple times and try to just give him like a glimmer of hope of like, hey, this is the life that you can lead if you get sober and if you start, developing positive habits. And every time he did the Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step program, and, he stepped 12 steps right back into the same position that he was in. So yeah. I think, once you find yourself in that position of being honest with someone, it really puts it throws the ball in their court. The best that you can do as a family member, as a friend, as a coworker, whatever the case may be, the best thing you can do is be honest with someone and address those things. And it gives them the ability to feel empowered in their own life, because now they can actually make that decision for themselves. And then B, it also sets them up to actually understand that they have a support system around them. A lot of times we will talk to somebody and tell them, everything's going to be okay, this, that, and the other. And it builds up this fake support system. It's almost like hitting the like button on Instagram. Like, liking somebody's photo does not make them any more or less of a true friend in your life.
Right.
So, if somebody's going through something, whether it be substance abuse, depression from losing a job, whatever it may be, the old pat on the back and telling me it's going to be okay certainly helps temporarily, but it doesn't help in the long-term solution. I remember times where my dad would get a DUI, and, there was one time he was in the hospital with a broken collarbone, and, everybody kind of shifted the focus from what made that happen to now we're here for your recovery.
Right.
Physically, not substance abuse wise. So, there were just years of, that dishonest harmony of not addressing the issues, letting things kind of continue down the path that they were on. And the result of that was, kind of the crux of why I'm so passionate about suicide prevention and awareness. Essentially early last year, I was working down, I was a platoon leader for a basic training company down at Fort Benning, helping, work with drill sergeants to transform the next generation of infantry soldiers. And, I'm working down there. My brother's working remote. He does cybersecurity stuff. And my sister was, living up in Jefferson, Georgia. And, I got a call at midnight from my brother, and he said that our dad had shot himself, and he had done so right after, taking our mother's life as well. And, that's one of those moments. Everybody has that moment in their life where you kind of like leave your own body and you feel like you're dreaming. And that's kind of what I felt in the moment, because I remember earlier that same day, I had gotten a phone call from my dad, and we were doing a rehearsal with our battalion commander. And, in those moments with work, the last thing that you want to focus on is anything that is not work related. Especially in the military, it's very stoic. You're in a position, you're in a meeting, you take care of that first, and then you move on to that second priority. And so my mind kept jumping back to, I missed a phone call. What could I have done different to avoid this from happening? And so, I called my company commander. He was an incredible leader. And, he told me in that moment, like, go take care of your family first. And so I drove up home to Atlanta from Fort Benning, and, found my sisters in the hospital, embraced them, and then, kind of went into, let's uncover the facts. Let's start figuring out what happened here and kind of, move forward with those affairs. And that for me was a defining moment personally, because I realized while you can't blame yourself for the things that happen, you can certainly try and take the lessons from those events away and put them to function for other people moving forward. Because I found myself in a situation of saying, well, if I'd answered that phone call, could the result maybe have been different? And at the end of the day, nobody really knows. But what I can do is try to figure out how to decode everything that led up to that event taking place and help spread a message of developing positive habits to prevent that from happening for someone else.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's in your control, right? I mean, I don't know your family, the situation, but just from this short time that we're talking, I'm going to say everything leading up to that started so many years ago. It's so many years ago. But in that moment, afterwards, I've talked to different people on here, and there's like two paths you can go. You can disappear into a depression or wallow in self-pity, and that's okay. Like, and that's not a judgmental thing to say. Like, of course, there's a lot of people that would do that, and it would be completely understandable. And then there's people that decide that they're going to do whatever they can to prevent other people from feeling that same kind of pain. I just had Admiral Winnefeld on here, and his son accidentally overdosed, and it's the same thing. It's like, how do you move on from there? And there's certainly a power in going, this is the most painful thing I've ever been through. I don't want anyone else to have to go through this. So what can we do to start moving forward with that? So, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, of course, JT. And, fortunately, both of those things can be true at the same time. Feeling depressed or feeling this sense of, overwhelming WTF about a tragic event, that, you can feel all of those things, but also realize in that moment that there are ways to prevent this from happening. It's not a perfect world by any stretch of the imagination, but you can find a way to take away from a negative and turn it into a positive. And, that's what I talk to my brother all the time. And that's one thing that we decided early on was, how can we take a negative and turn it into a positive? And in this instance, we looked at it after the fact and said, okay, the first thing that led to this happening is obviously not a problem for everyone, but it can certainly manifest itself into a problem or an issue, and that is alcohol abuse. And at the time, my brother was drinking alcohol. I would go out on the weekends to breweries with my friends and drink alcohol. It certainly wasn't a problem yet. It hadn't manifested itself into consuming our lives. But we looked at it and said, okay, well, how many people do we know between the two of us that don't drink alcohol at all. And we were kind of like scrolling through our Facebook, and it was like, okay, well, I can't think of a single person actually.
Yeah.
Everybody drinks casually on the weekends, which there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
This is the Marine brother.
Okay. Well, what's that?
This is your brother. That's the Marine.
Yeah. He was in the Marine Corps. He did Marine reconnaissance and then attended UGA, got out, did cybersecurity, and he's loving his life out in California right now.
I'm sure he is, but the reason I even ask is, I mean, you can say that across the board, but then if you say that within the military community of find somebody that doesn't drink, because it's not only are you to find people will drink a lot of times within those types of professions because you're ostracized if you don't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You are so people, I've had people tell me, I don't trust people that won't drink, that don't drink with me.
Yeah.
Your vetting process sucks. I've done some really dumb things drunk. So you might want to rethink that. So yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is a weird culture. Everybody's probably seen, if you're in the military, you may have seen the HBO series Band of Brothers, and you'll remember the scene kind of towards the beginning where Captain Winters is talking to his men and they offer him a drink and he says no. And then behind his back, one of the soldiers says, "Oh, this guy must be a Quaker."
Right.
And so, that culture is still 100% there. We just did a little going away ceremony for one of the guys in my platoon. He ETS'd out of the Army, did some incredible things for the 82nd. And he's moving on to bigger and better things. And, we did a hail and farewell ceremony for the battalion. And, we always do it at a brewery is usually the location of choice. And, all of the people in the battalion, friends, families, they all come together and, it's always a fun event, but it's always the same. Like, I never realized how much free alcohol you get offered until you stop drinking.
Yeah.
Because you go to an event like this and somebody walks up with a beer and they're like, "Here you go, man, like free beer on me." And you don't want to be rude and say no, but at the same time, you have this personal, standard for yourself. And so I think it definitely is a negative connotation for a lot of people, but I think it also does wake a lot of people up to the freedom that they can actually make choices for themselves. And that you don't have to necessarily do what the status quo is.
That's it. It's an alternative.
Yeah.
And any time that there's something that's different, people will balk at it at first, but once they sit with it for a while and they go, "Oh, you mean I don't have to drink until I'm sloppy drunk with my buddies? I don't have to, whatever." Those are the times that a lot, my experience is people have come up to me after the fact and go, "Hey, why don't you drink?" And because I've been thinking about doing the same thing, and how did you go about it? So yeah, there's a lot of power in that, man. So, I mean, good on you and your brother for both kind of making that decision and then continuing on, because I think there needs to be more examples like yourself. Obviously the road that got you there, you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy, but the fact that you're doing this, on top of everything else you're doing in the military, and you're obviously excelling. So young soldiers, old soldiers can look up to you and see like, all right, well, shit, I don't have to do this. I can do something different. I can not drink. I can not feel like crap for my PT test tomorrow. What?
Yeah. I remember when we made that decision, it was 6 days after our parents had passed away, and we were still at home trying to figure out the getting all the things in order with the house and funeral details, whatever. And my brother and I had actually we had already started the sober process, if you will. On New Year's Eve that year prior in 2019, we said, "Hey, we're going to do an ultra marathon." And it was going to be my brother's first ultra that he had ever done. And we're going to do it in March. So from January 1st until March, we're not going to drink at all. We're just going to have water, hydration tools, whatever. And once the race is complete, then we'll go back to casually drinking. So we had already started January, February. not drinking at all, totally sober, prepping for this race through, a good train up cycle. And then, February 28th or 27th rolled around, and, this tragic event happened. And I remember we decided, okay, we trained for this race. We're going to run this race in our mother's name. We're just going to honor her for this, because she would want us to do the race. If we were in this position, if she were alive, she would say, you guys train for it. It's what you're passionate about. Do the race. So we drove up to South Carolina. My wife, she went to Clemson University, and I found this race that was at Table Rock Mountain, which is just outside of Clemson. And, we started the race, and as we were running, we kind of looked at each other and we were like, hey, we already started, we haven't drank in February. We didn't drink in January. Let's just keep going with it, because if we are able to demonstrate that it's possible, then other people will see that as well. And even if it makes them decide, hey, for the next month, I'm not going to drink, or maybe I'll stop drinking on the weekdays, even those small steps in the right direction would be huge. And so we decided, we'll start this process. We'll not drink at all. And then we finished that race 31 miles later, and we both kind of looked at each other and we were like, man, a beer right now would be really good. And that was kind of the first time where we were like, this is going to be a lot more challenging than we think it is, because you don't necessarily think of yourself as being addicted to alcohol, but you do get addicted to the social settings in which you consume alcohol. So, going to breweries with friends, going out on the weekends, doing karaoke, whatever. I found it personally challenging to go into those environments and continue to kind of focus on the conversations and not focus on avoiding alcohol. And so right at the start, man, it was pretty challenging. But once you get going with it, you realize I don't actually need alcohol to be, a fun social person in these settings. And it kind of opens up your personal character development, if you will.
Yeah. It's important that you say that, Dan, because if you came on and you said, hey, I just made this decision, and alcohol, I was done with it because of this absolute freaking tragedy that was in my life, a lot of people would go, well, he did it because that, of course he quit drinking. But for you to say, I still found it hard, I still struggled in these social environments, because so much of what we do is kind of built around it. You mentioned breweries. I love breweries. I still love breweries. I'll go into one and my wife's like, are you sure? You sure you want to go in here? I'm like, I love the atmosphere of them. I just don't drink alcohol anymore. So to say that, to go, yeah, it was still hard. I still had to. You really have to flip the script, man, and say, it's almost like, you talk about bad habits. You can dwell on trying not to do the bad habits, or you can run towards the good ones. And if you can, and you think, man, what I'm doing is actually kind. I'm being kind to myself by not adding this poison, instead of going, no, I'm just not going to be having a good time with everybody else.
Yeah, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can, it's a skill that you have to practice. Nobody walks into a karaoke bar and says, hey, hand me the microphone, I'm totally sober and ready to sing. Yes. That never happens. Yeah. But it is something that you can train, in the same aspect of your very first business meeting ever never goes perfectly the way you think is going to. You practice those customs, those courtesies, and how you interact in that environment over time. And the same is true for being sober. You find yourself at a party or a get together with friends, or, whatever the case may be, and people are drinking alcohol. And someone will always ask you, hey, man, are you okay? I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Right. As if seeing a Bud Light is going to cause this, trigger this PTSD or whatever. But every time it's no, man, I used to love drinking IPAs. That was my favorite drink. Yeah. But now I love, the freedom of being sober and, being able to wake up on a Saturday morning and go for my run without, throwing up the prior night's beverages, so.
I didn't drink Bud Light when I drank. I didn't drink that crap when I drank a lot. So I
guess I mostly drank in college, so Bud Light was the most affordable option at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I was an IPA guy, and that's what I think part of it was masking it. Because if you were slamming a 12-pack of Schlitz in college, that's acceptable. If you're in your 40s and you're part of the craft craft beer connoisseur group, then it was okay for you to drink, really good beer. And then you realize, well, I just had 4 at 9%. Those hitters, man, that you start to feel those. I might as well just go on and slug 12 Schlitz. There wasn't a huge difference. It was just more expensive, but
I think you brought up a good point about making it realistic through someone else's actions, right? My brother and I talked, and it was like, okay, well, we want to be sober, but I've not seen anybody that I know personally go down that route other than, a couple people I knew for religious reasons. They didn't drink alcohol. And so it was like, okay, well, I've never seen an example of this being done. So hopefully you and I doing this will be that positive example for someone else, and it'll create kind of this chain effect. Because, we always think of someone's success story, and you always get told that story kind of like at the end. I think when you and I talked previously on Facebook, and we kind of used the metaphor of like climbing a mountain. And, most of the podcasts that you listen to where they have a guest on, it's always somebody who is at the top of the mountain. Like they're there. They've, won a competition, or they've persevered through combat and PTSD and personal trials in their life. And they have willed into existence the goals that they wanted for themselves, the causes that they're raising awareness for, whatever it may be. And for a lot of people who, are just going to work every day, doing their 9 to 5, it almost makes it seem totally unrealistic to put themselves in their shoes, because it is such a black and white. Like, this person has achieved incredible things. I'm commuting 45 minutes to my office job. So where is that middle ground? How do you get from one to the other? And so that's kind of, when you talk to me and I was like, wow, like this, JT's asking me to be on his podcast. I honestly don't know why. And then I was talking to my wife, and she was like, well, sometimes it's important for somebody to hear the climb. You're not at the base of the mountain. You're not necessarily at the top, but you're going those uphills and those downhills on your way, towards the goals that you want to achieve with raising awareness, doing races, whatever it may be. And so it kind of opens that up to other people to see, like, okay, this is what the journey looks like a little bit.
Even when you said, I love putting a race on a calendar because it's an accountability thing, you've done that, but more importantly, you've put these procedures in place, and you've set up a system, and that's where it's at. You could take all those other goals, and those could go away as long as you're staying on this. You're trusting the system, your process. Then you're going to continue in a positive direction. And Dan, I don't think people realize it while they're living it. What you've done, and this isn't me just blowing smoke, I mean this, what you've done and lived through, and then the direction you're heading, this is, dude, you are a fucking unicorn, dude. And people need to look towards people like you. Because there's a lot of people that they need that direction. So to hear somebody who's gone through this and go, all right, well, they still found a way to move in this direction. It's fantastic. I give you a ton of credit, and I foresee, you may be in your journey, but I foresee some really amazing things coming your way, and you having a profound impact. Dude, I'll get choked up even talking about this stuff. So, yeah. I don't know you, but I'm proud of you, man.
I appreciate that, brother. Yeah, I think you said the word credit, just now, and I think most of that credit, honestly, you talk about accountability measures. The credit for where I'm currently at is due entirely to my brother. You talk about, as a young man, you need to find somebody that you can look up to and use as a mentor, kind of like this beacon of light that's going to guide you in the right direction. That is my brother 100%. We don't have any uncles or anything like that. Our dad passed away. And so, my brother and I, we're close in age, so it doesn't really have that like mentor feel to it, but it is someone that I can bounce ideas off of. And, we kind of feed off of each other. from a moral standpoint, from a physical standpoint. And then, a great deal of credit for, the event that I have coming up in Colorado with the Spartan Ultra World Championships is, due entirely to my work friend, my best work friend, here at Fort Bragg, Steve Kent. This is a guy, he's, 215 pounds, never run more than 8 miles in his life. And, I was kind of talking to him about, some of this stuff while we were working out in the gym one day. And, we kind of decided, all right, you're going to make me fast and I'm going to make you really big and strong, because I'm kind of this smaller distance runner guy and he's a big gym rat. And, we hit the ground running. Army PT starts every morning at 6:30. So we would meet up at 5 and go for a run before PT. And so we're standing in formation, all sweaty and nasty from our run. And then PT starts, we go do that workout. We're, eating and cooking breakfast together at his place just outside of the gate, because I live about 30 minutes away from Fort Bragg. So we're cooking big breakfast, making sure we get the calories we need. He's holding me accountable after work. We're going rock climbing to make sure our grip strength's there for the obstacles. We're hitting the gym, whatever. So I would not be prepared for this race if it wasn't for Steve. So, you find that one person on a daily basis that you can connect with and they'll really hold you accountable. Like, there are days where I'm calling Steve like, hey man, like, wake up. It's 4:30. We got to meet at 5.
Yeah.
And he's calling me the same exact way, because you can't do it alone.
No. That's
the last person that I owe credit to is certainly my wife, Shannon. We had only been dating, for a little over a year when my parents passed away. And, it would have been too easy to say, like, I don't know what's going on with this family, but I'm going to go elsewhere and figure something else out. But, from the start, she was, there all through Ranger school with me. She's my race crew for every ultra I've done, changing my nasty, sweaty socks while I'm throwing a banana back, whatever. She's just an excellent support system for me, through tragic life events such as losing your parents to, the burdens you throw on yourself with doing an endurance run. So, my brother, Shannon, and Steve, like, I would not be half the man that I am right now if it weren't for those 3 people. So, I think the credit goes elsewhere. It still takes someone to action on it, but the credit certainly goes to the support system around that person.
It's one of my biggest takeaways from our conversation. You can say, you need to surround yourself with the right type of people, because you will become whatever you surround yourself with, 100%. So when you put those positive aspects in your life and surround yourself by people doing positive things, and that's only going to help you head in the right direction, and vice versa. Dan, when you say you want to just raise awareness, what is it you're trying to do? What is it, if you could tell other people, and this is not just the veteran community, this is, we're talking about suicide awareness. What are some of the messages you would really like to get out there to people?
Absolutely. I'll bring up, kind of the same quote I used with, personal accountability in the context of suicide awareness. And that's, honest conflict is more powerful than dishonest harmony. And what I mean by that is, on a daily basis, we see people, whether it's in the military or, regular personal life, family member, you see somebody who is going through things, significant life events that, maybe they got in a car accident or they're losing their job, whatever it may be. They start to develop negative habits, and those negative habits are like a snowball rolling downhill. It just compounds over time. And if you don't have those honest conversations with someone and tell them like, hey man, like you're starting this, road, you're developing these habits, you're such a powerful individual with so many amazing goals, but I see you're kind of, going down this direction. That's not a comfortable conversation for people to have. And, as a result of that, it's not had a lot of the time when it needs to be. So I think the message, if I could share one message, it would be honest with those around you. Don't ever feel like something that you have to say to someone is going to have a negative reaction when they're at that final point, if you will. Like you get to a point where someone started to develop negative habits, they're going downhill, they're going in a direction that they shouldn't be going. And a lot of times it's easier to avoid that conversation, because you don't like, personal conflict. It's hard. You don't want somebody to be mad at you or be upset with you. But ultimately what they really need is a friend that cares about their well-being and is going to be honest with them. In the context of suicide, I don't want to talk about suicide because somebody next to me or in this group setting may know somebody who has committed suicide and I don't want to offend them. Or, I don't personally deal with suicide. I'm not depressed, so I'm not going to talk about suicide. And that's kind of the mindset that a lot of people approach it with of, I'm not depressed, or I don't want to offend somebody else who knows someone who's committed suicide, so I'm not going to talk about it. But really what we need is more people to talk about it. And I remember, in the 82nd, we do this thing called All-American Day, and it's the first Friday of every month. And our commander gives us a topic of discussion that we talk to our soldiers about as leaders. And one day the topic of discussion was suicide prevention and awareness. And our acting battalion commander at the time, brought up the conversation. And, I kind of caught myself in my head, kind of like, man, this kind of is emotional. It's making me think back to this life event. And then I realized as we started having the conversation around the room that them making me feel emotionally comfortable would not have been worth missing that entire conversation. Because what people took away from that discussion was how important it is to be honest with your soldiers, with your neighbors, and with each other, and ultimately with yourself. And that is way more powerful than just being silent about the discussion because it may make someone else feel uncomfortable or emotional.
Yeah. Or make you uncomfortable.
Right.
You
yeah.
know what I mean? Just because, a lot of the conflict avoidance stuff is ingrained in people, and they just don't even want to put that stuff out there and have those because it makes them uncomfortable in the first place. But
right.
Yeah, I'm going to make sure that people know exactly where to go to support you in what you're doing. Your GoFundMe. I'm going to have a link to the Save Project. Is that what it is? Save Project?
Yeah, it's Save is the
foundation.
So it's the Save organization.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll have links to that as well. Man, I just wish you so much luck with everything you're doing. I think you're doing absolutely amazing stuff, man, and I cannot wait to see where this thing goes. Sorry, to see where this thing goes. I thought I shut my phone off. That was very unprofessional. Let us know if we can support you in any way. Any way we can help get your message out there. We are 100% on board.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to get the message out there is just pick up the phone and call a friend. If you're in a position where you can't donate money to the GoFundMe, that's fine. Call a friend, have a conversation. That's equally as valuable. So, if there's somebody that you can think of off the top of your head who may be going through something a little difficult, maybe you don't donate $10 to save. Maybe you donate 10 minutes of time to talk to a friend. That's equally as valuable. So, but yeah, Instagram is ultrarunner_Dan. In the bio, you'll see a link to Athletic Brewing Company where you can, get some delicious beverages that are non-alcoholic.
What's your promo code? Get your promo code out there.
Yeah. Promo code is Dan L 20.
Dan L20. Get yourself 20% off your first order.
Dan L20. And again, it's ultrarunner_Dan on Instagram. I don't have Twitter. I think it's kind of difficult sometimes to get your word out there in just 40 characters or whatever it is these days.
Yeah.
So Instagram is the main means there. And it has the link in my bio for the GoFundMe for the Save organization.
Perfect, man. We'll have links to your social. We'll have links to everything on there. And let's get you back on after the race too, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, we got some good results to share.
Dude, finishing. I interviewed Amelia Boone before. Do you know who Amelia Boone is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had her on another podcast, and she's got some pretty wicked stories about the World Championships. So, I'm sure you'll kill it. And man, we'll have you on. I'd love to even do a regular part with you. Have you come on every once in a while and just kind of keep us up to date with your calls and how things are going.
Yeah, I'm all about it, JT. I appreciate it, man.
All right, brother. Listen, have a good one, man.
All right, you too.
All right, that's it for me. Thanks for checking out the podcast. Please log on to, I don't know, wherever you get podcasts from, Apple, Spotify, wherever, and leave us a rating. It means a big deal. It means a big deal? It doesn't even make sense. It is a big deal if you do it. So please do it. I really appreciate it. I'll catch you guys next week.